Alrighty.
Hey.
What is up, everybody? Welcome to the Wayfarers Christian Church weekly deep dive podcast. We are super excited that you've decided to join us today. I say weekly. We've missed a few weeks over the last few weeks just because of different things that we have been doing. But usually, if this is your first time tuning in, usually on this podcast, what we attempt to do is just have weekly conversations that cover some of the topics that we've been covering during our Sunday services here at Wayfarers. And we like to bring different people in to make sure to have a lot of different perspectives and just to go deep on some of those topics. So today, we've got our associate pastor, Noah Randolph.
Hey, everybody.
There's a whole story behind it.
Yeah.
Used to be the teaching pastor. We've decided, I think associate pastor makes more sense because he does so much more than just teaching. But, you know, hopefully he'll do a little teaching for us today, too. So we're going with associate pastor. Then we've got a special guest who's been on with us before, but this is his first time back in a few months now. We got Garrett Sayles with us.
Hey, everybody.
And our everybody's favorite, the fan favorite. I've been getting so many comments from people who tune into the podcast. They're like, Ashley is awesome. You need to keep her on. So we got Ashley Wakefield on with us too.
Hey, everybody.
So we got a good group of people going. Usually we have Tom Stolaric with us as well. He was not able to be with us today, but he should be joining us next week, so it should be an exciting conversation. I also want to make sure to shout out Jacob Dooley. He's back behind this wall. You can't see him, but he's running the computer. He's running the stream.
Yo, Jacob.
Shout out to Jacob producing the stream for us.
Can I call him JD?
JD?
I call him Yaakov because that's his Hebrew name.
What does the D stand
Hebrew
for,
for
JD?
Jacob.
Dooley. Jacob Dooley.
Oh, Dooley.
Yeah, and so if you guys hear somebody shouting out, you know, your microphone's dead or something like that randomly during the stream, you know that's Jacob back there behind this wall letting us know what's going on with the stream. But either way, like I said, we are just excited and thankful that you have decided to join us today. If you've been tuning in over the last few weeks, we've kind of been covering a variety of different topics, mostly related to church. And we last week spent a little bit of time talking about tithing and some of the issues related to tithing. As with many of the conversations that we have here on the podcast, we started running out of time. We got to the end of it, and we were talking a little bit about some of those issues, and Ashley was saying this just brings up way more questions that we don't have time for. So we're back at it this week. We're going to cover some of those maybe follow-up questions that might have come up from the last episode, and just kind of go into some of those other topics. If you didn't tune into the last episode, just to kind of give a quick summary about some of those issues, we were talking about the concept of tithing, which is an Old Testament concept related to giving a tenth of your spices or money or harvest or whatever to the temple and to the temple priests as a way to give back to God and to fund the work that was going on in the temple. And it's a concept that some Christians have brought forward into the New Testament era, into the church era, and it's a term a lot of people use for giving to the church. You know, people pass that offering basket around or that offering bag, or in the age of COVID, it may just be, you know, an online link or Cash App or something like that. But you know,
Text to 2555.
Right.
if you've ever been at a church, you know that churches are all about asking for your money, and that's something that we wanted to explain a little bit. You know, why is that such a major part of what churches do? Where does that money go? How does that relate to tithing in the Old Testament? We went through all kinds of different topics. I'm just going to encourage you, go back and listen to that last episode. I think it was a really, really good episode if you want to catch up a little bit more on what all we talked about. But as we were finishing up, Ashley had asked a really good question about a family member of hers. And she's kind of in one of these weird situations where the wife in the relationship, she's comfortable tithing and giving to her church and has no issue with it. But her husband is just kind of uncomfortable with it and not really sure where the money's going, not really sure if he trusts the church maybe that he's a part of, and so he does not give. And so there were a whole bunch of several questions, I guess, kind of involved in what you were asking. But if I'm remembering correctly, Ashley, one of the things you were saying was just kind of like, how does that relate to some of the promises you have in the Bible that God's going to bless you if you are generous?
Yeah.
And I don't know, are they missing out on the blessing because only 50% of the couple is giving?
And it kind of spiraled into like more of a concept of like, what is marriage? And you were talking about that a lot.
Exactly.
So
yeah,
we might be talking a little bit
I was
more
going
about
back to
that.
listen to it, and I was just like, you know what? I kind of took it a whole different direction than than what Ashley was saying. But my point, I do really believe, especially with finances, it's as much as possible, it's important to be on the same page and to do your finances together as a couple. And so, it's not something that's in the Bible or anything like that, but I just believe that it's wise to just do your finances together. And personally, my own opinion is still that, like, I don't really understand having different bank accounts and different separate finances and things like that. That's not how me and my wife do it. Everything just goes into the same pot, and we make those financial decisions together. So obviously that's the ideal, and that's the point I want to make. I believe that would be the ideal that we all want to work towards, because the biblical concept is that marriage is two people becoming one to a certain extent. But the question you were asking specifically, Ashley, was just, God promises to bless people who are generous. So are they missing out on that blessing a little bit because only one half of the couple is tithing? And it's been a couple weeks. I've slept since then, so I'm trying to remember exactly what my answers were at the time. But I think my basic feeling was that I don't know that God is necessarily like sitting there keeping a tally, keeping score, and being like, this person gave, this person didn't. They're going to get the blessings. They're not. I am just increasingly convinced that over and over again, God is a God who wants to be generous and wants to pour out His blessings on people. So I would lean that direction. I don't know that we can know, I don't know that God gets to bless whoever He wants to bless. And I don't know that we can know one way or another, but we kind of ended just with my opinions. I'm curious, Noah, Garrett, you guys are here. Ashley had mentioned maybe throwing this question out to Garrett too. So Garrett, I don't know why, maybe you want to take a shot at it. What would you think as far as that specific scenario?
With the specific question, just to make sure, is this couple they're married and the wife is tithing, but the husband isn't tithing. And so
and another part of this, and I guess we can answer that after we let Garrett and Noah speak about it. I guess the second part to that would be that and there's like another family friend of mine who does this, of ours that does this as well, is that they don't tithe because they don't trust where the money is going. So what they do is that they take their money and they may be charitable with it. Like, for example, one of my aunts, my aunt has a family friend, and so he pays for her grandson's tuition, but he doesn't tithe. And so I guess in his way, that's like
that's his tithe.
Yeah, that's his tithe. And so I guess another part of that I guess we can get into is just does that suffice for a tithe? Does that actually make up for that? Or
how does that work?
Well, I guess the first thing is, do you miss out on certain blessings? Yes, I believe you do. It may not necessarily be, it depends on it may not be a tangible blessing, but I do believe that you do miss out on a blessing. I think one thing you mentioned about, they're not tithing to the church, so they're giving to a charity. That more so just sounds like an excuse not to give to the church. If you're truly concerned about the well-being of a church and seeing this church go further, you're going to, sow into it and, make sure that you're doing your part in giving. And if you're that concerned about, okay, well, I don't know where the money's going, have you talked to your elders or your pastors about, okay, well, can you guys report back once a year about where the money's going? Because I know our church does that. And so I would say that sounds like a conversation or something that they should probably pursue, but not. They may be avoiding that. But to me, that just sounds like a simple answer. Just if you feel like that's a bad thing, or if not, go to a church that does let you know what they're doing with the money. To me, that's just a simple. To me, but I do feel like you are missing out because one thing me and my wife do, we are diverse in our intimacy. what I mean is that we do a thing called financial intimacy, emotional, physical, and it's 6 different ways of intimacy. I can't remember all of them right now, but one of them is financial intimacy, where we learn, okay, well, how does this person spend money? Because I'm more so the cheap type. Mm-hmm. I'm going to say, okay, we buy this right now. Is this going to last us a minute? Is this going to, is this like an emotional purchase? Is this like and if it is, can we afford it? I'm okay with it, but I think long term, and not saying my wife doesn't, but she also thinks in a more strategic way with the money as well. But once we got one account, we definitely got to learn more about each other in terms of because money it's important. A lot of us say it's not, but money does matter. And so learning how to spend it, you're learning a lot about a person. And in terms of us staying connected and us staying as one, that's one of the requirements. I feel like that it'll take to, just remain intimate with your partner. Yeah. And I think things like that, in terms of a blessing, one of the blessings you could be missing out on is that you're married to somebody, but you guys aren't whole. Mm-hmm.
Right. So there's all kinds of things that you could miss out on by that kind of being the problem. But that second question is really interesting to me, Ashley, kind of the second related question you were saying, where you were like, does giving to something else, maybe paying for tuition for somebody, private school tuition or something like that, or whatever, does that count or not, is kind of an interesting question. Noah and I have had some conversations about this, but I've never heard I know what my position is on it. I talked about it a little bit, but what about you, Noah? How have you ever dealt with that particular issue, and what would be your thoughts related to it?
Remind me of the second part of the question, because I was so caught up in what he was saying. What was the second part of the question?
Well, the second question was, if somebody is taking the money that they should be tithing and they're putting it towards a charity or giving it to somebody else to help them, does that count as a tithe, or does that make up for the fact that they're not tithing?
That's a hard one for me, because most of my life I've been kind of anti-establishment, and so a lot of the perception that you have, even asking a question like that, is church is an establishment, and if I just give to someone on my own, that's not an establishment, right? Church is an entity that is generally a 501c3, it has its own government, corporateness to it almost, and what you do in that situation feels different than what you do outside of that, right? When you give to that, you feel like you're giving almost to a business, whereas when you give outside of that, you don't feel like you're giving to a business. I'm not saying that I believe this, but this is kind of the mental way of that most people think about it today, at least. And I kind of had that for a while, and I really, through conversations with Nick, I've become a little bit more okay with things being a little bit more institutionalized, and I think we need organization, I think we need structure. And so I feel like that question is really, there's a deeper question underneath that, which is, I want to give my money to something that has no ties to a bunch of people that are all in an office space that get to decide where my money goes, right? And instead, I want to give my money to a very real problem right in front of me, right? And I don't know. I've just been uncomfortable lately with that distinction. I think that the people in the office can be kind and good people. I think that the people in the church office can be people that really are looking for situations like that and are trying to do that. And so I don't think it's a clear cut if you're a part of a church in an office, you're never going to see those situations like you're talking about. And that money's just going to go to bigger buildings and more TVs and, whatever it may be. And so I will say I've known churches that have done that their giving goes to better TVs, goes to higher production quality. Like I've seen that happen, and I relate to the frustration of someone that would watch that happen and feel like, man, my tithing's going to camera equipment, as opposed to someone that needs their tuition paid, right? And I do think the church should think about doing that more. Think about, hey, maybe we shouldn't be putting as much of our money into lights and cameras and all that kind of thing, and more into helping someone out if they really want to go to college and don't have the money to do so.
So it sounds like it's similar. You're saying something similar to what Garrett was saying too, which is that there's a question that lies behind that question.
Yeah.
So if somebody is asking, does this count? Can I give here versus giving to the church? What that's really illustrating probably is that they're uncomfortable with the church for some reason. And so, sometimes, I feel like Jesus does this all the time where somebody will ask a question and he'll just like take it a completely different direction because it's just like, that's the wrong question. Like,
That's
or he'll ask them another question. He'll ask them a question in response, and so this could be one of those situations where it would be like, does this count or does it not count? And I think maybe the response question, what you're saying, Garrett, could be something like, well, why don't you want to give to the church?
Right.
Is it what Noah's saying because you are worried that the money's going to get spent on things that don't matter as much, and you feel like there's some control here where you can actually have it go to something good?
Yeah.
Those deeper questions may be the ones that would kind of lie at the heart. And it sounds a little bit too like, Garrett, you were thinking there's maybe just a character thing going on there at some point that you would really want to talk through with the person themselves.
Yeah, I would say that because you want to function on one accord when you're married with somebody.
Right. And I do want to emphasize that. I love that point a lot too. There's all different aspects to being really connected with somebody and really intimate with somebody. And from my experience, and it sounds like from your experience, that financial area is another area of intimacy that you can have with a spouse.
So how often do you, in trying to have those conversations, like those intimacy conversations, like, is it like every week or every month or?
I guess we don't really kind of map it out. Like once a week we're going to do this. You guys know the way we spend a lot of time together. Most of the time, if you see me, I'm with China, or if you see China, I'm with her. A lot of the times. But one thing I always was conscious of growing up is my dad made family dinner sacred. He made that like very sacred, like no TV. And it's not dogmatic, if the game is on, we'll watch it. But he was always very conscious of, okay, this is a time where we're engaging with each other, talking, we're connecting, we're going to pray, we're going to let everybody get to the table first, let everybody get their food, and then we're going to eat together. It was a one accord thing. Yeah. And my dad was very big on that, and so that's one thing I saw in my growing up, and I brought that into our marriage, and so.
So there's just all kinds of different areas that can be useful to bringing that together. And so it sounds like that's part of what we're feeling, is that may be one of the bigger issues that lies behind there, is both a relational issue, but then secondly, maybe there's this fancy theology word people use sometimes called ecclesial, which has to do with church. Yeah. And it's an issue people might have with a church. I remember when you first brought some of these questions a couple weeks ago, Ashley, you had some thoughts yourself as to what, how you would respond to people who maybe had some of those qualms with giving to a church and stuff like that. And I remember some of those points being really good. So, you've been asking all the questions. I want to hear from you. How would you respond to somebody who was like, I don't want to give, maybe in the situation Noah was bringing up earlier, I don't want to give to church. It's just going to go to more equipment that they don't need. I'd rather give my money directly to somebody who needs tuition paid or something like that. How do you think you would respond?
I would say something similar to what Garrett said, and I think I said this last time too, but I think asking questions about where the money is going, because the way I see it is that anywhere where you're sending your money or you're investing your money, if something is going wrong or you feel like there's suspicious activity, you're going to ask questions. Like
Right.
if you look at your bank account and something is wrong, you're going to call your bank and say, hey, what's going on with this? Like this amount of money was not supposed to come out. So why not ask questions for the church? I feel like you have the right to do that because you're investing not just your money, but your time, your loyalty, your love, relationships. And so I feel like you have a right to know what's going on. And then I guess from my perspective also was, I guess two sides of this was if there is something going on and it bothers you that much, maybe that's not the right place for you. Like, and maybe you need to find the right church, because I feel like that no matter what church you go to, you should give. But I feel like you need to find the right place for you.
Right.
And if you're having issues giving there, I think that it may be an issue with you internally, or if it's not an issue with you internally, it may be the church. And if that's the case, then maybe
Right.
you need to find a different church to go to, because maybe that's not the right place for you if you have a hard time giving yourself or giving your finances to that church. But I think also at the end of the day, I honestly feel like it really doesn't matter what they do with it, because you're never going to know every dime that's being sent out to whether it's being spent on, cameras or TVs, like you
Right.
said, or whether it's being spent on tuition. And I look at it from the perspective of, if I know that I'm doing what I'm supposed to do, whatever somebody else is doing, it has no effect on that. Like, I'm going to get blessed regardless. And I feel like looking at any offering or tithe that I give, that's a blessing that is meant for the people of God, for the church. And if somebody else is handling that wrong, then they're going to answer to God for that accordingly. And I don't think you have to wait to heaven, wait to get to heaven, because I think people get impatient with the whole, vengeance is the Lord thing. Like, they want to see they want to see some type of justice done right then and there. And I feel like I'm just at peace about it. Like, once I give it, because I feel like when you give in a way where you've done what you need to do out of your heart and it doesn't bother you because now it's out of your hands.
Yeah.
So like you just let it go and you release it. So
No, that's really, really good, because that was one of the things I thought of when you first brought up the question, was that what may be kind of lying behind that is this general distrust of churches. But I've seen individuals and maybe if it's not a church, I know some people that are like, well, I'll give to like a charity or something like that. But individuals, churches, charities, everybody can misuse that money.
yeah.
There are so many examples of charities that are misusing the money that's going to them.
Yeah.
There's so many examples of individuals that are.
And
So
There is a difficulty too in our modern times. I was reading about this in one of the books in my studies here at Mid-South, but I can't remember what book or I'd cite it, but a huge shift has happened where a lot of social work is being moved from churches to nonprofits. In recent years, actually, a huge amount of what nonprofits do is like the actual, like, taking care of other people and looking out for other people. Grants and foundations are now kind of the way to like get help people in situations, and churches have way less of a responsibility to do that, and they kind of outsource it to these more nonprofit status things. So that creates a huge difficulty, because now church is almost shifting from the place in the neighborhood where you take care of everybody else and house like soup kitchen stuff inside the church, and instead we'll just go and start a nonprofit that's a soup kitchen, right?
Yeah.
And so that has created a really hard position for people that want to tithe, because now church is becoming the place where you worship, where you learn spiritual things, and the nonprofits are the things that are now the ones doing the work in places that need the help, right? And so I think part of this question is just our current times and what church is becoming and what nonprofits are becoming. So I don't know. That doesn't give an answer, but it definitely sets the stage for why we have this question in the first place.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say as you were talking. It made me think of that's just, I think that this generation of churches is just different than it used to be back in the day.
Yeah.
And I guess I was wondering about, certain aspects of things that churches did now that they may not have done back then. Like, going on mission trips, like, we take a trip to Africa, we take a trip to India to go minister to people out there, or the fact that technology is the way that it is, that you kind of have to not only pay for technology, but pay for it to be good quality, and then you have to pay to stream things. I don't know how it works, but pay to stream things online to reach other people in other countries who can't
Right.
physically be there. So I don't know if that play is just like the times that we live in, and that people are, and I guess I don't know if that would be an issue for like the older generation versus the younger. So I don't know if that's a generational issue but I think, because I've had conversations with younger people, because I just had I want to say a very heated debate with my cousin on Saturday about the whole issue of tithing, and I think that it was kind of the same thing that I brought up last time, was that, she had an issue with like, do our pastors really supposed to get paid? Like, do they really need to get paid for that? And I think that kind of goes back to the whole nonprofit thing. It's like, why is this a job? Like, because her perspective was that everybody should be spreading the gospel.
Yeah.
Which is true. Everybody should be spreading the gospel. But I think from my perspective, I think that there's certain people who are called to do that for their job. Like, not everybody is called to be in the pulpit or called to work in the office back in ministry.
Right.
So some people are meant to volunteer their time to it, but then have a job outside the church. But some people
the
are meant to
marketplace.
work in the church.
Yeah.
And so that's how I look at it. And I think that people think of that solely as charity, but sometimes God can call you to that. So
Yeah, I think I heard two things as y'all talking through the question. And the first thing that, from my experience, what I've learned is I honestly think a lot of it does just come from some people honestly just borrow arguing points from somebody else. And they haven't really found the substance in that for themselves.
Yeah.
They heard someone else say it sounded good. So they took it and used it.
Yeah.
Well, I don't give my money to the church because in the past they use it for X, Y, and Z. Okay, do you believe that, or you heard someone else say it and it
You
sounds
saw
good, so now you
meme
taking
or
it?
somebody on Facebook saying it,
And-
so you're going to say it now.
Yeah, and two, some people, miss their call because, okay, if you really have if you're that concerned about the issue in the church, the fact that you even see that problem should let you know, like, oh, that may be God calling you into like fixing that problem. Me and
Yeah.
Nick we visited a church this past weekend. And he said something that reminded me of what we're talking about now. He's talking about a story about how it was this church and the people were meeting in it. Remember that, Nick?
Yeah.
And the church, they met, but it was like certain corners were dusty and certain things weren't really cleaned and tidied up the way that this lady walked in and felt like it should have been. And so one day she walked up to the pastor and said, "How dare you have church in here and it's looking a mess like this?" And the pastor was like, "Well, God showed it to you, not me. We missed it."
He said, "We've been meeting here forever. We never noticed that
We
was a
missed it.
problem.
Yeah.
You saw it. Help us fix it."
Help us fix it. Like, that's the, because it is, the reality is, it is a lot of things going on in the church that, need to be fixed. And honestly, the pastor knows that. The pastor sees that. But he or she's only one person.
Right.
And then chances are there are going to be a staff. And staff is limited because nobody's tithing, so that also means that nobody can really get paid. You got folks nowadays that need to get paid, especially millennials, because we're looking for some type of security financially in establishment. And so a lot of us can't volunteer as much because we're not getting paid, but it really has to go back to, if you really got a heart for what you're saying is an issue, then pursue it.
Right.
Pursue it realistically, but if you see an issue in the church,
That's great advice just in
Do
general with
something.
the
Yeah.
church
Yeah.
things. If you have an issue with something in particular, that may mean that you're one of the people who can, rather than just point it out, maybe you can be a part of the solution. That's a thing I grew up my whole life with my dad saying all the time. He said, what are you going to do about it? Whenever I would bring up some sort of problem.
Yeah.
And I like that attitude.
Yeah.
So that's one reason people may have a difficulty or not want to give. The point Ashley was mentioning with her cousin was really interesting, because I've heard some other people bring this point up. They don't want to give because they're like, well, we're all spreading the gospel. Why should that guy get paid to do the work?
Right.
And so that's a situation where I think I would respond with some biblical answers. There's a verse, I was pulling it up here a second ago, that I wanted to reference, and it's from 1 Timothy chapter 5. Because if you remember a couple weeks ago when we did this, I have this weird position that I know a lot of church people don't, where I think tithing is an Old Testament concept.
Yeah.
I think there's principles of it that go forward to today.
Yeah.
But the giving that the New Testament church does, as far as I'm aware, is never called a tithe at any point in time. And Paul never uses the term. He
Right.
never calls on anybody to do it.
Yeah, you're right.
He collects offerings. And the second part is he often advocates for salaries being collected to pay people who work in the church. And one of the most famous verses where he does that is in this verse in 1 Timothy. He's writing to Timothy, a young pastor in a new church that's getting started, and he's telling him, here's some things for you to know as you're getting the church started. And chapter 5, verse 17, he says, in my translation, it says for the elders. The Greek word is presbyteros. That's a word that people translate pastor, elder, overseer. There's lots of different things, but the term we usually use for pastor is connected in some people's minds to this idea of elder, but you have different terms at different churches. And so he says specifically, to the elders who direct the affairs of the church well, they are worthy of a double honor, especially those whose work is both preaching and teaching. And this double honor, he connects specifically to payment. So he follows it on by saying, that's what he means by double honor. They get the honor of the position and this
payment.
double honor of payment. So the thing he says too is, for the scripture says, do not muzzle an ox while it is treading out the grain. He pulls from this Old Testament law that
And
basically
Deuteronomy,
that talked about an ox doing its work of treading out the grain. And you know, how cruel is it to make this ox work and then put a muzzle on it so
so
it
it
can't
can't eat while benefit from the work that it's doing.
And so he's
Yeah.
saying that not paying elders, pastors, especially those who preach and teach, he says, is in some ways equivalent to muzzling an ox while it's treading out grain. There's a certain principle there that he follows through. And so he says, and then he brings up another one which says the worker deserves his wages. And so a lot of times I just it is wages, it's payment for work that the pastors are doing, which is why I think sometimes people think, this is why I'm not so comfortable with using the term tithing, because tithing was something you did to support the temple and the priesthood of that day and age and different things like that. It wasn't like a direct payment for the work that the priests were doing. It was just kind of something that went into
it just goes to the corporate
general
entity.
pot.
Yeah. The general pot.
Whereas
Yeah.
I think Paul really does believe that these people are getting paid for work. So, you know,
And I didn't.
that verse
you
kind of,
finish? I didn't-
yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
okay. And another thing I wanted to say with this, because I just thought of this, is that it really is work to be a pastor. Like even when you're teaching, like it's a lot of study. And I'm saying that specifically as somebody who's had to teach Bible study. Like I'm not a pastor, so I don't have to do this every Wednesday night, every Tuesday night, or every Sunday. But it requires a lot of study, not just of the Bible, but also reading other books, reading other articles that are related to that, trying to check your facts, trying to make sure that everything is organized. That takes a lot of time. And not only that, but I think you also have to consider the repercussions of that role, because I know that I've had this experience as a teacher where people will question your teaching. Like you'll be standing up there teaching a class and people will come at you, well, what about this? What about that? What about this? And our pastor, I've literally seen someone in our Bible study question our pastor's teaching because he did not agree with it. So he was questioning his teaching right there. And my thing is like, do you ever put in that amount of effort? Like when you're spreading the gospel, do you put in that effort? Do you actually take the time to actually study that hard, to be willing to have somebody come against you for your teaching and then have an answer for that? Like, you know, so not everybody does that. That requires a lot of work. It requires you to have a thick skin because people can, you know, hurt your feelings because you're putting in so much effort and then they're questioning your logic, your theory, or your interpretation of the Bible. And I mean, that's a lot to deal with. So.
Yeah, I agree. It takes a lot of work. For somebody who's in pastoral training, I see it firsthand. It's a lot of work. We're talking about the speaking portion of it. We're not talking about when you got to, throughout the week when folks are calling you and you got to wake up and talk to them. And, I was talking to a pastor and he was explain the difference between a pastor and an apostle, and he was saying a pastor, like you're babysitting people almost in a sense spiritually, like you are really like kind of like they call you crying, okay, God's gonna take care of you, God's gonna do this, you got to counsel, but you honestly you're handling people's souls, and not everybody that come through that church is gonna be strong. Some are gonna be weak, and some are gonna have issues, and you have to be able to tend to them, so.
And I think for me too, like, I think we as a culture want to see like a lot of things done, you know? We want to see like the showy things get done. We want to see poverty like reduced. We want to see like less homeless people on the streets. We want to see like these things that are very visual, right? Whereas what I've learned with Nick has been that the job of a pastor is very subtle. Very subtle. Like it's one of those jobs that like you have conversations with people very frequently, but you don't see a lot of growth maybe in that person for a while, you know? And you don't see a lot of tangible, a lot of, you know. And so I've seen a lot of pastors feel that pressure of, I don't, you know, I just don't see what I'm doing in actual, like, I don't see the results. And so what they'll do is they turn to like, numbers, or, you know, like they'll turn to baptisms or all these different things, because like that's the only thing tangible they have to really like point to of, see, I'm doing this work. But I think there does need to be like a reshaping of like what is the beauty of church even, you know, because like, for me, like there is a huge amount of beauty in one person saying, my job is to guide all of you in your emotional lives. Like, think about that for a second. Like, people's emotions are intense. Like, that's not a job that, like, like, you know, anybody is
don't take that
like,
lightly.
raise their hand to do voluntarily. If you really think about it, like, that is getting in the mess and the muck of a lot of different backgrounds and traumas, and like it's almost like stepping into the role of a counselor without the degree and without the, like, if you think about what a counselor does and what a pastor does, ask yourself how much more money a counselor makes per hour for what they do versus like what a pastor might make per hour. And think
they
about
make below the average, I think.
So like in many ways, you know, I do feel like the value of church is in that. You know, that's what church should be. Now, if we want to have conversations about is church actually doing that, okay, we need to work on some things, you know. But I think that's what it could be, what it can build towards, what I think I see the pastor being able to do very well, and to guide people through all walks of life. You know, like there's a beauty in the fact that like pastors watch people get born and then can watch those same people grow up, get married. Like it's like that is like something like out of this world to me. It's like someone could spend 25 to 30 years with one person, watch them get born, they get married in the church, they then have their own family, and that pastor can watch that growth from baby to adult. You know, like there is a unique thing in that I think we miss just in our judgments of corporatism and, you know, those types of things.
So is that what you mean by anti-establishment? I'm just asking.
Yeah. It's like in many ways we see it just as a business, but it's more than that, you know. It's taking care of people, and so
So it's just like going beyond the aspect of a business and collecting money. Gotcha. Okay. But that's kind of similar to what Pastor Hunt did with you, because I don't know if he saw you when you were born, but he's known you since you were a kid, though, and he's you know, he's counseled you and helped you grow, and you think of him like as a father because he married you when you and China were here. And, you know, so that's kind of a similar situation that you guys were in, because
he watched me grow up, and I can honestly say like he was there, like you know,
every step of the way.
Know, so.
It's funny because it's kind of it feels kind of self-serving to be defending why pastors should get paid as somebody that gets my salary from people giving, and I do want to reemphasize. We're a small church at Wayfarers, but our members have been so generous, and I'm very thankful for that, for their giving. So
we don't have many.
We're kind of preaching to the choir, and I don't know that our congregation needs to hear this as much as some others might. But if I'm kind of summarizing a little bit of some of what we said, I would say pastors should get paid just because it's biblical. That's part of one of the things I would say. They're getting paid. I don't even know that it's a tithe. It's just wages. It's wages for the work that they're doing. But some of the points y'all brought up are good points too. You know, it is hard work. I think sometimes people think all you do is you get up and you just talk a little bit or
Yeah.
something like
I
that.
don't know.
They don't see all the behind the scenes prep work, all the study, all that kind
Yeah.
of stuff that goes into that. You've experienced that teaching a little bit,
Oh,
and
yeah.
how much prep work you have to go into it. So
Yeah.
imagine doing that day in and day out for a lot of pastors. So that's a part of it.
Yeah.
People need to understand that. What it sounded like both Garrett, you and Noah were saying a little bit too is just that also that the work sometimes even goes beyond that. And part of the work that you're doing as a pastor is this work of walking, doing life alongside other people, being a guide, a mentor, a shepherd to kind of help them through life. There's a lot of beauty to that, and that is something that's cool, you know. And I like your point, Noah, about we get frustrated sometimes because we'd like to see more tangible results for our money. So that may be the temptation sometimes. It's like, I'd rather give this money to pay tuition somewhere else because I can clearly see what that's going to. If I'm just paying to pay for this salary, and maybe for this pastor at my church, it's a lot harder for me. Like, what is that even going to? What is he even doing? And like Noah was saying, some of it may be behind the scenes. You may not realize you paying his salary is allowing him to have time to go get coffee with somebody and talk them through something that they've been going through.
Yeah.
You paying his salary is giving him time to really mentor a young man all the way from childhood through on to working in ministry himself, like y'all's pastor has done with Garrett.
Yeah.
And one other thing I'll add to the list, because again, it feels a little self-serving, but I think this is important to realize. And this is something I was just thinking about this last Sunday.
It's self-care.
Self-care. There you go.
This is self-care right now.
But I was thinking about this. Garrett mentioned a little while ago that both he and I attended a different church, new church plant here in town called New Heights Memphis, which shout out to New Heights.
Yeah.
Shout out to Josh Germany, pastor over there. He's a really cool guy.
Yeah, he's a good
Both
guy.
of us got coffee with him today.
Yeah, really good
I
guy.
love a lot of what they're doing. But his sermon really impacted me. It was a really interesting point he brought up, because he was talking about pastors and elders and the people that are in charge of a church, kind of explaining some of the biblical backing behind that. And he read this really interesting verse from the book of Acts, where the Apostle Paul is about to leave a city, and he's kind of giving them these last instructions
Acts
as he's
20.
about to leave to the next city. And he actually is pretty convinced that he's going to die, so he's never going to see these people again. So this is kind of like
That's so sad.
the last things I am telling you.
is this the Ephesus? Is
And
this
so-
the Ephesians?
Mhm.
Yeah.
So he says, in Acts chapter 20, verse 26, he has this very, very interesting phrase where he says, "Therefore, I declare to you today that I am innocent of the blood of any of you." You're like, man, that got intense really
Wow,
quick. What is
yeah.
that all about? And he says, "For I have not hesitated to proclaim to you the whole will of God," which a lot of people would describe that as the work of a pastor, this sort of proclaiming the entire will of God, guiding you. And that phrase, as Paul is always doing, he's like referencing the Old Testament all the time. That's the thing he's doing. And Pastor Josh over at New Heights pointed out that this is a connection to a concept you get in Ezekiel. And he referenced Ezekiel chapter 3, verses 17 through 19, where I'll just read those verses for us here as well. It says, "Son of man, I have made you a watchman for the people of Israel. So hear the word I speak and give this warning to me. When I say to a wicked person, you will surely die, and you," these are the leaders of Israel, the elders, the people who should be in charge of Israel, "and you do not warn them or speak out or dissuade them from their evil ways in order to save their life, that wicked person will die for their sin, and I will also hold you accountable for their blood. But if you do warn the wicked person, and they still do not turn from their wickedness or from their evil ways, they will die for their sins, but you will have saved yourself."
Whoa.
And so this is a concept that gets brought up in the New Testament, something that's,
So here's the crazy thing.
yeah.
I have had a conflict this week that was directly related to that, and I brought that verse up in the conflict.
Interesting.
And like, I wasn't certain how that would go. Like, I wasn't certain if I did the right thing or not.
Sure.
And that coming up that way
Just confirmed
is
it
just
for you.
confirmed it for me.
Yeah.
And so that's really cool. This is awesome. And so the point that brought up for me, and this something that Pastor Josh really helped bring to mind to me again, is that when you're taking the role of a elder, of a pastor, of somebody that's going to be over a church, not only are you taking on that role of shepherding them, guiding them, and whatever. But there is a real role where like you are going to be answerable to God
Yeah.
for these people. And there's a different verse, I believe in James, where James says, not many of you should be teachers.
Yeah, I remember that.
I do remember that
Because
one.
he actually says if you're going to be a teacher, then that means you're going to be, there's an extra level of responsibility and accountability that you're taking on. And so the analogy kind of in our modern context, I think a lot could be in situations where you have certain people that take on an extra level of responsibility with their job. Their job becomes extra dangerous for some reason. And those people get paid a lot more money because their job is so dangerous. The example you hear a lot is police officers. Police officers are literally putting their lives on the line for the sake of other people.
Yeah, I like
so their pay is kind of according to that. Same with military or other things like that.
Yeah.
It's different. But in some ways, I do think that pastors and teachers in the church are taking an extra spiritual level of responsibility and accountability by taking on that job. And they should probably be compensated for taking on that extra level of responsibility and accountability.
It's almost like if somebody was to kind of come to me about that, like I would in a sense convict them in a sense. Like, well, not in a sense, I would convict them because just if somebody was to say that to me, what I would say back is, okay, what would you do if you were me? You lay down at night and you really begin to ask yourself, like, okay, did I truly? Because you got some people that walk this earth that truly feel a pull, a call to share the message. You got people that wake up in the morning and who really have it goes past a desire. Like, this is what God's telling me to do. If I don't do this, then I have a hard time sleeping at night.
Yeah,
I worry that much about people that they should hear the message of Christ.
Yeah.
I care that much. So you're telling me that I can't get paid because I care about your spiritual growth? I'm not trying to be smart, but I'm just saying,
you're right.
I will convict them, like, honest to God, like, this is something that I'm called to do. My conscience is going to be disturbed if I don't do this. And so I can't get paid. And I really admire Paul because I read actually from Acts 20 to the rest of the book last night, and I was reminded of like how persistent Paul was with the message that he preached. Like specifically when he was in chains and they were going to Rome to have his hearing, and they were on this boat. And if you read it, like, they went through a shipwreck, like it's a storm, like it's a lot going on.
Bit by vipers. That's fun.
It's almost like, and it's like through all of that man still was like talking about what God was saying in the midst of all that. Like that was his focus. That's what God gave him to do, and he made sure that got done. No matter, even though the folks called him crazy, he preached while he was in hearing. He preached like on a boat while it was a storm. This man was, there are people, I believe that there are people that walk this earth that still have that same desire to this day.
Yeah.
And you mean to tell me that they should not?
And the ironic thing about that is that they kind of, because there's so many things about this is bringing me back to that conversation. I'm not even going to call it a conversation. It was just a heated debate. That's all it was about on Saturday. Is that like, she, was saying that everybody is spreading the gospel, so why the pastor should get paid. But it almost sounds like that she, based on what was going on during that conversation, it kind of sounds like, and I could be wrong because, I don't always recognize the calling on people's lives, but she was talking about a specific friend that she used to have that she's no longer friends with. And she said that this friend wasn't a Christian. I forgot what they were. I think they may have been atheists or something. And so she was saying that she kept trying to, because they would have conversations about, about if God is real, the Bible, and so on and so forth. And she kept trying to impress on her that, basically impress upon her on the truth is the simplest way I can say it. And, she got fed up at one point because she felt like the relationship was toxic. So she kind of cut off that relationship because she was like, I spent a whole semester trying to talk to her and him, and I'm not going to deal with it anymore. And so she was like, I'm done dealing with that, that toxic stuff in my life. And she was like, I'm tired of healing people. I need to heal myself. And I said, well, maybe that's your calling. Maybe your calling is to heal people. And I said, and it's okay to want to take a break to tell God that you're tired, but you have to get back into it, And I thought it was ironic that she was saying that pastors shouldn't get paid, but what if that's the call on her life and she's supposed to get paid for that,
Well, and I would say too, like, if you're the pastor in a church and you're dealing with a person like that, you can't do what she did. And you can't just be like, okay, I need to take me time, you know.
Yeah, and I actually told her that. I was like, you can't just give up on them. And I said that, you're kind of planting the seed. And I say maybe they didn't hear what you said right then, but maybe months later, maybe years later, it'll connect true. But you can't cut everybody off in your life that doesn't.
But that's what I would say to her is like, you can do that, and that's fine for you to be able to do that because you're not in a relationship where you're over her, you're peers, right? But as a pastor, like if that person is in your congregation, like it's kind of your job to constantly be in that person's life, no matter how toxic they may be, And so like,
it is interesting. It's kind of like a family situation, sometimes
like
if you have a toxic family member, it's unfortunate because they're your family, like you're kind of stuck with them. Well, one of the things that really comes in a lot when you're a pastor is just your family. You can't really step away. And so because of that, there is kind of an extra thing that people can do to kind of help them out, which is at least let's help pay your bills, help you survive, help you live.
And I don't know what was exactly toxic about it for her, because because I was like, well, you don't have to hang out with them on a Saturday night if they're doing something that's like going to get you caught up. But it seemed like the conversations were toxic for her, right? And I guess for me that wouldn't be toxic because I used to have a friend who was not atheist, she was agnostic, and so she had belief in a God, just not in the the Christian God. And so we had debates before. They were never really heated debates, so we had disagreements. And I think in that situation we had both just agreed not to just get into that because we understood our difference of opinion about it. So for me personally, that conversation wouldn't be toxic for me. Now, I don't know. Everybody's different. I don't know what exactly was toxic about it for her. I don't know if it was occurring every day or every week or she just had her patience in that area was just shorter. I don't know. But everybody is different. But I know that we did have a disagreement about, I guess, cutting people off for that reason because we cannot come to an agreement on if we have the same faith or the same beliefs in that area.
So that I like that. That may be a great topic for next week. I'm actually thinking about is Noah and I've discussed this a little bit, but sort of like where do you draw the line between self-care, like I got to cut you off because this is what I need, and where do you draw the line between like Christian charity and actually being like, I'm going to be there to help you out. I'm going to take up my cross. I'm going to help you.
That's a great Ed Sheeran song about that.
Really? And so
I shared it with you.
You did. I remember that now. Yeah. So I'm going to go ahead and say that will be a cool topic. Maybe we can touch a little bit next week. So we're finishing up here. We're almost done here on our time. No. I don't want to keep people too long. So before we finish up, I do want to kind of make one last point, which is that we've spent a lot of this time defending why people should be paid, why they should. Pastors especially deserve their wages, as Paul says, all that kind of stuff. But I do want to make sure, I don't want to just leave it at that. And I do want to make sure to emphasize that there are situations where I would say people abuse that and that they should be held accountable for that as well in some ways, in different ways. I unfortunately have I sort of understand why people are so sketched out by giving to churches, because I know way too many churches that do some messed up stuff with the money that people give them. Some of the stories I've heard from churches and about how they spend their money and how they misuse their money and how much, there are pastors out there that are getting paid just ridiculous amounts of money and drive a super nice car and have a really, really nice house. Meanwhile, their church members are struggling to get by and stuff like that. And so I do want to, I guess, pastorally, I want to acknowledge that there are people out there who abuse and misuse the gospel. The Apostle Paul actually mentions those people. He actually says there's people out there who are just preaching for the money, and he acknowledges that those kind of people are going to exist.
Although he says, let them.
The gospel is being preached. And so the point being that I think that those are two different conversations we're having a little bit. And unfortunately, sometimes people try to use their money as a discipline tool. So it's like, I'm not going to give you money because
It's a way of
controlling the person.
Yeah.
And this is where I do think that the tithe concept, the principles of the tithe, even though I don't think that's a New Testament idea, the principles carry through. Because part of what God wanted the Israelites to understand with the tithe was that it's a way of kind of letting go of that tight fist around your money, letting go of it a little bit, and ceding control to God. Yeah. And that is one of the biggest life lesson things that I just think is, I'm realizing that is one of the most important things, if not the most important thing to God. God wants us to trust him.
Yeah.
And if we're not willing to give him money, if we're not willing to let go of money, then that may be a sign that we don't fully, completely, totally trust him like we should.
That brings up do we have time for one more question?
Yeah, we're almost
okay. So I don't mean to end this on a little bit of a controversial note, because this was another issue that got brought up in the debate that my cousin and I were having, and it became controversial because we had a very big difference of opinion, and I get why it can be. So if you guys disagree or any correction on my part, that's totally fine. But we got into the issue of people outside the church tithing who may be involved in some things, like some things that are not Christian related. Like, for example, I remember a while back, I was watching a sermon of a pastor who was saying that a guy donated toys for the children at the church, but he owned a strip club. Yeah. And so he was donating toys to the church, but his business was a strip club. Yeah. And so she had that issue of like, well, what if you have somebody who's donating money to a church and, they are involved in something that is definitely the opposite of Christianity. And so I think there was an issue of sponsorship there where, like, her idea was like, how come the church doesn't use sponsors? Like, having sponsors come in and pay for everything so the church doesn't have to. And I think, to make the question as clear as possible, it's like, of course, I don't agree that if somebody outside the church who is not a Christian, or at the very least does not hold those values, I don't think that you should come together on values because your values are different. Like, obviously, we're not going to come together to plan anything. But I think you can still take their money, because the way I look at it is like the wealth of the wicked is laid up for the righteous. So if they decide to, I just want to give you all this money, you guys can take it and do what you want with it, that's fine. But I think her perspective is like, I don't want to be a part of a church where a pastor is taking money from somebody who is, like, for example, owning the strip club or something, like they're getting money like that. And so I just wanted to know y'all opinions about that.
I guess my first thought is initially, okay, if you feel like, if you see that problem, you feel like that's an issue and the church has sponsorships, all right, we're going to see you Monday morning at 9 a.m. to see what we're going to do about this. Like, because then what the pastor may not even know, is the pastor aware that this person is giving illegal money?
Well, I think the issue, because this was just all debatable, I guess it was just sort of, what if he's aware? And my thing was like, even if he was aware and they just wanted to give the money and not come together to try to do something together, I was like, as long as their ideals are not coming together, they're not hanging out. If he just wanted to give the money, that's fine. I don't care personally, but she did. She was like, I don't want to be a part of a church where the pastor is taking money from a guy who's selling drugs and he used the money from the drug deal to come give to the money. And it's like, I understand that his lifestyle and his ideas and his values are completely off. So no, we cannot come into agreement with that. But I guess the way I looked at it was like the wealth of the wicked was laid up for the righteous. So if he just wanted to give the money,
Garrett has thoughts.
Well, I think I can empathize with a little bit. Garrett, you already brought it up a little bit, but one of the things you said was that sometimes it does feel like people have a lot of pre-built up arguments that they have in their mind, and it's like, I guess if that's a hypothetical situation that may happen, we'll deal with that at that point. But if it's not going on now, if it's not going on at the church that you're a part of, then that's not a reason to not tithe. So it may be a case by case basis.
It wasn't not to tithe. I guess she was, I don't know. I guess from her perspective was like, she didn't want anything to do with the church, period. Not just tithing. She just didn't want to be a part of it, because she was like, if I found out that the pastor was taking money from that, I don't want to have nothing to do with the church. I'm leaving, like, type thing.
And so
it's like a, if you do this, you get in trouble. If you don't do this, you don't get in trouble. Because it's like, okay, I'd ask her, okay, where do you work? Let's say it's Kroger. I'm pretty sure there are people who have illegal finances that have given money to Kroger. But you work there and take a paycheck from them. You may have taken money that was illegal. Like okay, you're creating a scenario. You're talking yourself out of doing something at this point. Yeah. Like Nick said, if that bridge, we'll cross that bridge when it gets there. But and then for people that always talk about how Christians always are judging, you're judging now.
Yeah, that's true.
It just,
yeah,
it's like,
Well,
it is.
You're judging now by saying you're not going to give your money to. But
yeah, and I think the hard thing with something like that is that like we're very inclined to be ultra moral about things we're already.
That's a beautiful word.
Ultra moral.
Ultra moral.
Yeah.
Give me a pound of that one, man.
You know, put that on a T-shirt. Ultra moral.
I'm using that.
We're very inclined to be ultra moral about things that we already have a disposition to not like,
Yeah.
and then very uninclined to be ultra moral about things we already have a disposition to like, and so it's like one of those situations where you're going to be like trying to find like every like nickel and dime that is out of whack on something that you already have like a negative disposition towards, whereas like things that you love, you're not going to be looking for that at all, and that's just a problem with our generation. I can say that as a millennial, it's just like I don't like the lack of forgiveness in that, even if a church were to do that, right? Like put yourself in your shoes. If some like drug dealer gave you $1,000, how tempted are you to be to
right? I'm like, I could use that. Put that in my savings account or something.
Would you give it back or would you keep it? Like,
exactly.
You at least think about it. If you say no, you at least think about it. Like,
it's like I don't know.
It's
like
kind of good.
it's one of those situations where one that's such a random. I don't even know
like
if that
hypothetical.
happens.
Yeah, and the ironic thing about that, and I'm saying this not to be judgmental to her because I love my cousin.
Yeah.
But she smokes weed. So my thing is like you're gonna pay for weed, but then you're gonna have a problem with the weed dealer giving money to the church.
Right.
So it basically it's like a cycle. You're giving money to the weed dealer, he's giving it to the church. So basically you're still giving your money there. So it's like
and so that goes into what Noah was saying. We're really good at sometimes picking and choosing which moral issues we're going to be upset about, which moral issues we're not going to care about. Human beings in general are really, really good at picking and choosing that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And I understand why money is the easy one for a lot of people to pick and choose. Jesus himself acknowledges that loving money, being obsessed with money, even riches themselves can make it harder for a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven than camel go through the eye of a needle. The love of money, being the root of all evil. There's a lot of danger that comes with money, misusing money, a lot of difficulty and sin. So it becomes an easy punching bag to also connect to the church. And sometimes I would say rightly so, because I do think there's a lot of churches that haven't been skeptical enough, haven't taken Jesus's warnings at heart, and have been just too lax and loose about money. When the money comes in, there's a real danger, there's a real level of responsibility that you have to keep about yourself. And so I do think ultimately, and we do got to finish up here. This maybe can kind of be a last point here as we close up. Ultimately, I do think that the best thing a lot of churches can do, the thing we've kind of been going back to over and over and over again, is that as much as possible, as much as churches can be good about trying to keep some transparency with what the money gets used for, trying to help the people in the church understand, listen, you may have been burned by bad churches and bad pastors in the past. You may be super skeptical and you may be like, where the heck is this money going? I understand that. I feel you. I feel your heart with that. Let me show you what we use our money for. And the same thing going kind of the other way around, because I think this is kind of what we're all saying. Let's just let's quit being so skeptical and negative about church people, and let's understand that there's really good people that are working in a lot of churches, really good people that really do care about a lot of people, you may not be able to see what the fruit of some of that is, like Noah was saying, but they care about the Lord. They want to serve the Lord well as well.
Yeah.
And let's just kind of give them the benefit of the doubt. Let's try thinking better about people than always thinking negative about people. And
when
as a Christian attitude, I think that would be good.
Yeah, and when you do meet people that don't do that, don't let that decide how you think about church in general. Just let that decide how you think about that particular church member. You know?
And so there's a lot of issues related to that. So, like I said, unfortunately, it's fun. We could always keep talking about more and more things, but we're out of time today. I would encourage all of you to tune in next week. I think we'll talk about that topic you brought up, Ashley, a little bit about like where is the line we can draw between helping other people when it's hurting us, and where can we draw that self-care line and be like, man, I can't do this anymore. I got to step away for my own good. And I don't know. Can we even do that? Is that even allowed for Christians to do? I think that's a good conversation that may help a lot of people. Yeah. So if you're listening or tuning in with us, I would encourage you, tune in next week. That might be something that'll be really helpful for you. Yeah. This Sunday, I would encourage you to tune into our live stream here at Wayfarers. We go live at 7 p.m. here in the chapel building of Mid-South Christian College. We're in the Dwayne Dutka Memorial Chapel. Tune into our live stream. We're going to be doing a reading through the book of Ephesians. If you've never been able to say, I've read through an entire book of the Bible, come this Sunday, you will definitely be able to check mark that off your list. We're going to make it interesting. It's going to be interactive. It'll be a good teaching and learning experience for you. And you don't just have to tune in online. We would love to actually come see you in person as well. We've got the doors open now, and we'd love to see people come and hang out with us this Sunday, so I'd encourage any of you to come be a part of that. Otherwise, we will just see you next week on the Weekly Deep Dive.
BYOB, bring your own Bible.
Bring your own Bible. All right, thanks everybody.
In Ephesians, is only 6 chapters, right? Yeah. It's pretty easy to get through. Yeah, so you guys can get through there real easy.
It'll be good. It'll be a good time. So come hang out, and we'll see y'all next week. Bye everybody.
Bye.
Bye.